You care too much about their opinion, about their approval, about being liked. And every time you do, you give away power. But what if I told you? The moment you stop caring, they start to unravel. Today, through the cold brilliance of Machiavelli, we expose the terrifying truth. Indifference is a weapon, and the weak can't survive it. There is a strange paradox in the psychology of power. One Machiavelli understood centuries ago. The more you show you care, the more others feel entitled to your reaction. The more eager you are to be understood, to be liked, to be chosen, the more invisible your strength becomes. Because to care openly, too early, or too much, is to offer your power as a gift to those who have not earned it. Machiavelli never said this outright, but it echoes through every page of The Prince. Control does not come from aggression. It comes from restraint. The ability to hold back, to stay still when others expect movement, to appear unmoved when others are desperate for a reaction. He knew that true influence comes not from what you give, but from what you withhold. Consider this. Why does the indifferent person always seem more powerful? Why do we chase the one who isn't chasing us? Why does the quiet one in the room command more attention than the one shouting for it? It's because indifference breeds curiosity, and curiosity breeds power. The moment you step back, when you stop nodding along, stop seeking approval, stop offering explanations, you create a vacuum, a space that others instinctively feel the need to fill. That space is where your control begins. It's subtle, invisible, but suffocating to those who crave your attention. People are not disturbed by noise. They're disturbed by silence. Silence makes them uncomfortable. It makes them question. When you care, they are at ease. When you pull back, they panic. Machiavelli understood the power of appearances better than anyone. He wrote that a prince must always appear merciful, faithful, humane. But behind the curtain, he must be willing to betray all of it if necessary. Why? Because if others know your every emotion, your every move, your every weakness, they own the map to your soul. So what do you do instead? You learn to govern your expressions. You learn to observe without reacting. You learn to allow others to wonder what you're thinking without ever satisfying that curiosity. You become emotionally expensive, and when you do, everything changes. Think of the manipulative friend who thrives on your emotional involvement. The moment you begin to pull away, to respond slowly, to speak less, they squirm. They double down. They ask what's wrong. They offer sudden warmth, flattery, false concern. But don't mistake it for genuine care. It's desperation. A need to recover the control they once held over you. Because in their world, your attention is currency. When you stop spending it, they go bankrupt. Now, most people don't realize this. They think power lies in force, in being the loudest, the most dominant. But that kind of power is clumsy. It burns fast. Real influence, the kind that lasts, is built on emotional discipline, the ability to create tension and hold it. To stay silent while others speak too much. To remain cool while others get flustered. To act only when it benefits you, not when you're provoked. This is why Machiavelli admired leaders who were hard to read. He praised those who could appear kind while remaining lethal, who could seem detached while remaining watchful. Because unpredictability is power. And nothing makes you more unpredictable than indifference. You see, when you no longer react the way they expect you to, you become untouchable. They can't use guilt. They can't use praise. They can't use flattery. None of it works anymore. You've disconnected the emotional strings they once pulled. And now, they don't know what to do with you. They may grow irritated, or try harder to win you over, or pretend not to care themselves. But underneath it all, they feel it. That cold shift in power. That unsettling realization that you no longer need them the way they need you. This isn't about cruelty. It's about clarity. about recognizing the games people play with your emotions and choosing not to play anymore. The indifferent man doesn't chase. He doesn't argue. He doesn't beg. He simply removes himself, quietly, calmly, with a half smile that says, "I'm not angry. I'm just not invested." And that is the most frightening thing of all. There are those who feed on reaction. They thrive on your emotional participation. The sighs, the raised eyebrows, the nervous explanations, the need to be understood. These people are not always obvious. They don't wear masks of evil. No, often they wear smiles. They play the victim. They claim love. They say things like, "I'm just being honest," or "Why are you so sensitive?" But underneath it all lies the same objective: control. And what is the one thing they cannot tolerate? Your emotional withdrawal. Machiavelli would not have called it emotional manipulation. In his language, it would be framed as a strategy of influence, a tactic to bind others through pressure, guilt, confusion. But the effect is the same. You become tangled in their expectations, their needs, their moods. You become predictable, reactive, easily provoked. That's when they win. Because they are not actually trying to convince you. They're trying to wear you down. They want you emotionally tangled. If you get angry, they can say you're unstable. If you explain, they interrupt. If you ignore, they accuse you of being cold. No matter what you do, the conversation loops back to their narrative, where they are always the victim and you are always the problem. But what happens when you stop playing? What happens when you offer no rebuttal? When you no longer justify yourself? When their bait goes untouched and their emotional fireworks meet only your silence? That is when the panic begins. Machiavelli would admire such control, not because it is passive, but because it is devastatingly precise. You're not arguing. You're not retaliating. You're simply not reacting. And in doing so, you take away their greatest weapon, your emotional energy. Without your emotion, they're exposed. Because manipulation requires friction. It requires a push and pull. It requires someone to feel uncertain, to feel guilty, to feel defensive. But when you remain unmoved, when your eyes stay calm, your tone remains level, your words are few, they lose their grip. Their theatrics fall flat. Their games echo into emptiness. It unnerves them. They don't understand why you're not playing along, why the guilt trips no longer stick, why the insults don't sting, why the attention they used to demand is now given so sparingly, if at all. It confuses them, infuriates them, forces them to confront a question they never wanted to ask: have I lost my power over this person? And they'll try to regain it. First, they'll escalate. The language becomes more intense, the tone more desperate. They'll try to provoke a crack in your calm. Any small tremble of the lip, narrowing of the eyes, change in posture, anything to prove they can still get a reaction. And if that doesn't work, they'll shift. Suddenly there's warmth, compliments, apologies, sentences that begin with, "I've been thinking," followed by a script designed to lure you back in. But even that isn't real. It's not resolution. It's a test. They're watching your face, your words, your body, waiting to see if the old patterns will return. But a Machiavellian mind sees through this, because it knows the truth: manipulation is powerless against stillness, against self-control, against a person who knows how to step back, not out of fear, but out of clarity. This kind of withdrawal is not coldness. It is calculation. You are not retreating. You are simply choosing not to participate in their illusion. You see their tactics for what they are: desperate attempts to remain relevant in a game you're no longer playing. They wanted your attention. You gave them silence. They wanted your energy. You gave them distance. They wanted your guilt. You gave them nothing. And it breaks them. Because the manipulative cannot function in isolation. They need a stage. They need an audience. And when the curtain rises and you are no longer standing in the wings, their performance collapses. They don't just lose influence over you, they lose identity. Their entire persona was built around controlling yours. And when that control dissolves, so does the illusion of power they built around it. So they'll stumble. They'll retreat, or they'll lash out. But none of that matters now, because you've done what few are willing to do. You've withdrawn, not to hide, but to dominate, quietly, calmly, without raising your voice. There's a moment, often silent, often unnoticed, when a person who has been constantly drained, constantly provoked, constantly made to care simply stops. The phone goes unanswered. The voice grows quiet. The expression turns unreadable. That moment is not weakness. It is not indifference in the emotional sense. It is a strategic shift, a turning point. Because the one who was once entangled has made a quiet decision. I will no longer bleed energy for the sake of your comfort. Machiavelli may never have used the term detachment, but his philosophy breathes it. In The Prince, he speaks of the necessity to appear compassionate, but never to let emotions govern action. He admired the ruler who could fake closeness while never truly lowering his guard. Why? Because proximity breeds expectation. Familiarity creates entitlement. And when people feel entitled to your reactions, your time, your thoughts, they begin to feel entitled to your obedience. That is where your power begins to vanish. It starts small. You explain yourself when you don't have to. You answer messages the moment they come. You justify every boundary you set. You apologize for simply existing in a way that someone else finds inconvenient. And each time, a little piece of your sovereignty is handed over, not torn from you, surrendered. But detachment is the act of reaching out and quietly reclaiming every piece. Machiavelli would tell you that the prince must not expose his true inner life. He must remain, as he wrote, learned in the art of dissembling. The wise man knows how to smile without revealing his motive, how to speak without revealing his position. Detachment makes this possible. Because only when you are free from the emotional pull of others' expectations can you begin to move like a sovereign, not a servant. You begin to make decisions for yourself, not to win favor, not to calm tempers, not to avoid rejection, but because they serve your strategy. This is the pivot. The moment where you begin to rebuild the center of your power. You stop offering explanations to people who are not owed them. You stop defending your time to those who only call when they want something. You stop over-explaining your silence. You stop seeking validation from those who would never offer it freely. And the most astonishing thing happens. Your value begins to rise. Because people notice. They don't always admit it. But when you pull back, they feel the loss. They feel the absence of your energy, your eagerness, your availability. And it unsettles them, because they had grown comfortable with your closeness. It made them feel important, safe, in control. Now, without warning, they are no longer sure how much of you they actually have. And uncertainty is Machiavelli's favorite tool. He said it best, it is better to be feared than loved if one cannot be both. Fear, in this case, is not cruelty. It is the unease that others feel when they realize you are no longer emotionally accessible to them on demand, that you are no longer predictable, that you have detached, not with drama, but with dignity. You begin to move differently. Your time becomes more deliberate, your speech more measured. Your eyes don't flicker with the same need for approval. Your silence is no longer passive. It is chosen. You are not pushing people away. You are no longer pulling them in. You've released the grip. You've stopped chasing. You've stopped trying to make them understand, accept, or choose you. And with every quiet step away from emotional dependency, you reclaim the throne of your own mind. You see the manipulator, the narcissist, the chronic demander of attention. They don't fear confrontation. They fear neglect. They fear being ignored. They fear not being able to provoke a reaction. That is why detachment is so effective. It does not attack. It dissolves. It starves the parasite. It denies oxygen to the fire. It removes the audience from the performance. When you detach, you stop speaking in the language of desperation and begin speaking in the language of presence. You don't have to declare boundaries anymore. You become a boundary. You don't need to explain your worth. It becomes felt through your calm refusal to participate in the emotional games others rely on. And they feel it. The change in your energy, the reduction in access, the quiet self-possession you now carry. You're not angry. You're just distant. And the more they demand closeness, the more they reveal their dependence on the power they once thought belonged to them, but in truth was only borrowed from you. Power does not always come from pursuit. In fact, the more you chase something, the more you lower your value in the eyes of others. This is one of the most misunderstood truths about human nature. Yet, Niccolò Machiavelli understood it, long before modern psychology ever caught up. He knew that power is not merely taken by force. Often, it is surrendered, through desperation, through eagerness, through the hunger to be noticed. But when you stop caring, when you stop proving yourself, the laws of gravity begin to reverse. Suddenly, the world turns to look at you. This is not magic. It is a reaction, a very predictable one, because people are drawn not to those who beg for attention, but to those who withhold it. In Machiavelli's world, a prince could not afford to seem desperate. Desperation was interpreted as weakness, and weakness was exploited. The prince had to appear self-contained, self-reliant, unmoved. He could not chase favor. He had to make favor chase him. That meant using absence as a tool, detachment as bait, and above all, it meant showing no visible need for validation. That same principle applies to you. When you become indifferent, not cold, not cruel, but unbothered, people around you shift. They lean forward. They begin to question your silence. Your unpredictability disturbs the rhythm they once relied on. And in that disturbance, a kind of magnetic tension emerges. You are no longer explaining, no longer seeking. You are simply being. And that makes them uneasy, because they are used to control. They are used to emotional purchase. They are used to people being accessible, expressive, responsive. When you remove those things without explanation, without ceremony, without drama, they are forced into a new role. They begin to chase. They want answers. They want reassurance. They want the version of you that once gave too much, too quickly. And the more they push for it, the more they reveal their dependence on your previous submission. The power they thought they had wasn't real. It was borrowed, sustained only by your willingness to keep giving. Now that you've stopped, they panic. They try to understand what they did wrong. They replay conversations. They analyze your words, your pauses, your tone. They craft new strategies. Suddenly, the person who never noticed your presence begins to feel the weight of your absence. The one who dismissed you now starts to observe you. The one who felt superior now feels unsure. You've done nothing, and yet everything has changed. This is not manipulation. This is the natural result of reclaiming your emotional energy. Machiavelli never advocated cruelty. He advocated calculated distance. He knew that power is a game of perception, and nothing shifts perception more rapidly than someone who no longer seeks to be included. Now they wonder, why are you so calm? Why don't you need their approval anymore? Why are you so quiet? Why haven't you explained yourself? Why have you stopped reacting? Each unanswered question turns into an obsession. They fill the silence with their own fears. They write their own stories. They chase their own closure. But you give them none. You let them wander. Because you understand now, attention is currency. And by withholding yours, you become the one they invest in. This is what separates the ruler from the servant. the one who is desired from the one who desires. The indifferent man doesn't move for others. He doesn't react to invitations. He doesn't announce his withdrawal. He simply vanishes from their emotional radar, and in doing so, becomes the only thing they can think about. Machiavelli would call this strategic mystery. The ability to let others come to you, not through force, but through curated distance. You're no longer playing the game on their terms. You're no longer trying to win their affection. You've become the center, and those who once overlooked you must now orbit around your silence. The more indifferent you become, the more they begin to imagine you know something they don't, that you see something they missed, that you are preparing something powerful. This aura, once created, is nearly impossible to fake. It must be earned through restraint, through calm, through walking away from the endless need to be understood, and stepping fully into the role of the one who lets the world guess. And they will guess. They will analyze your silence. They will question their behavior. They will adjust their tone. They will begin to treat you with more care, more attention, more curiosity. But none of it comes from compassion. It comes from instinctive fear, the fear that they no longer have you. And that fear is the very thing that makes them chase. You were taught to care, to chase, to explain, to please. But every time you did, you gave away leverage. You made yourself predictable, available, and controllable. And that is exactly how the powerless remain powerless, by feeding the needs of those who would never return the favor. But something changes the moment you stop. You withdraw, not with rage, but with reason. Not to punish, but to preserve. You begin to see through the illusions. The drama no longer moves you. The flattery no longer seduces you. The threats no longer intimidate you. You do not react. You do not explain. You do not chase. You simply stop caring. And that's when everything begins to shift, because your silence becomes unbearable. Your indifference becomes haunting. Your absence becomes more powerful than your presence ever was. Now they wonder, they worry, they recalculate. The same ones who once played with your emotions now feel the void you left behind. And in that void, panic takes root. This is the Machiavellian truth. Power belongs not to those who seek to be loved, but to those who master the art of restraint. So stop giving it all away. Let them wonder. Let them chase. Let them panic. Because when you stop caring, you win.